Hello, dunkers and diving suits. My name is TB Skyen, and before we get into the video proper today, just a quick little bit of housekeeping. Yesterday, because people have been asking for it in the comments, and some people have been asking for it on Patreon, I made a Discord server for people to join. And I figured, I'm gonna have 2 or 3 rooms, it's gonna be 10-15 people, we'll hang out, we'll chat, it'll be fun, I'll get to interact with some audience. And to cut a very long story rather short, there's currently 400 people on the Discord server, and we have rooms about creativity and media and gaming, and we have some social channels, and I have some moderation bots going on that's just trying to make sure there's not too much swearing, and I have special roles for people who are artists and people who are writers and people who are musicians, and we have feedback forums where people are posting their work and giving each other critique and advice, and it's been a lot of fun. And there's a lot of great discussion, a lot of nice people. I've been very happy with just how pleasant it's been. But it's also been me all of a sudden having to figure out how to run a Discord server with 400 people on it, which is not something I knew about before I started this thing. So I'm a little stressed out. I'm a little overwhelmed. Very happy. I've enjoyed it greatly, but I'm gonna put a stop to people just kind of flooding in. For now, down in the description of this video, there's going to be a link, which is good for 20 uses. For like 20 people can get in using that link, and then it's going to shut down. And then on the next video I post, there's going to be another one, and 20 or maybe 30 people or something like that can get in. And I'm going to do that for a little while until I stop being completely freaked out by all of this. And once I've kind of calmed my ass down a little bit and, you know, chilled the hell out, maybe we'll open up a little bit more, and maybe it'll be more of an open thing, and people can join more freely. But for now, I'm going to limit it. Sorry to those who would want to join, but who don't get to have the opportunity. But this, I have to take care of my mental health here, because this has been a long, unending torrent of fires that I have had to put out, which has been fascinating, and I've learned a lot, but I would like to stop learning some things right now, and instead focus on just making this video. So let's get into that, because this is Nautilus, the Titan of the Depths, and what's the deal with him, really? Like a lot of the other champions we've talked about in this particular series of videos, he's an old champion. He's someone who is kind of a leftover from before League of Legends really knew what it wanted to be, and for that reason, there's a lot of leftovers going on with his lore as well. This right here is his universe page with his character blurb, which is the little kind of short summary of who the character is supposed to be. It goes something like this. All know the tales, all pay the bilgewater tithe. Since time immemorial, Nautilus has roamed the dark waters off the coast of the Blue Flame Isles, dragging impious sailors to their doom. The armored Goliath strikes without warning, his inexorable footfalls churning the waters before swinging his enormous anchor upward to shatter mast and keel alike. He then pulls the flotsam beneath the waves to appease the wrath of the Bearded Lady. Now, the Bearded Lady is a character I think I've heard before in various pieces of Bilgewater-related lore, and she seems to be some kind of sea goddess who has something to do with you know, sailors and Bilgewater. I can't quite remember the details, but it's something that rings a bell. But Nautilus, in this conception, is essentially a god of the sea, or some kind of demon of the depths, who serves this Bearded Lady, doling out punishment to sailors who don't do right by her rituals, who don't, you know, pay the Bilgewater tithe, who don't do the right thing, who don't observe the correct rituals. Then Nautilus is going to find you, he's going to tear your ship apart and pull you into the depths. That's the conception we get here. But if you click on the biography link, you get to this page, and this page tells a very different story. Once, Nautilus was a sailor commissioned to explore the uncharted waters of the Guardian Sea. This expedition took him deep into unknown waters, where he and his crew found vast sections of black oozing liquid that none of the crew could identify. Though their job was to investigate anything new they found, no man aboard was willing to brave the murk except Nautilus. Only moments after he donned the hulking diver suit and climbed over the ship's rail, something lurking in the muck grabbed hold of him. He clung to the side of the ship, but the thing below pulled him fiercely, rocking the entire ship. The other sailors grew afraid and made a terrible decision. As he stared and pled for help, they wrenched his grip free of the rail. He tumbled into the ink, grabbing the anchor in futile desperation. Dark tendrils enveloped him, and he could do nothing but watch as the dimming outline of his ship faded away. Then everything went black. When Nautilus awoke, he was something different. The great iron suit had become a seamless shell around him, concealing whatever awful truth lay inside. All the details of his memory seemed fuzzy and indistinct, but one fact remained clear. He was left here, alone, in the sunless depths to die. In his hands, he still clutched the anchor that belonged to the men who had condemned him. Having no other purpose, he took his clue and trudged, too heavy to swim or run, in search of answers. He wandered without direction or sense of passing time in what felt like an eternal dream. By the time he stumbled upon the shores of Bilgewater, he could find no traces of the man he was. No house, no family, no life to which he could return. So these are two very different Nautiluses. In one version, he's posited as, since time immemorial, Nautilus has roamed the dark waters. Like, he's this thing that has always existed, that has always been part of the world, who's kind of a sea spirit or some kind of demon that's kind of part of the fabric of the universe, who exists because he's part of some kind of religious tradition or something like that. This Nautilus, however, is just a person, just some dude who should not have gotten into the water when he did. And because he got unlucky and was betrayed, he fell into the water, and now he's kind of awake again and kind of like, what the fuck happened and where's my family? These are two very different characterizations of the same person. Now, part of the reason why this lore is a little bit unfinished is because there's actually some pieces missing. This is a slightly edited version of a lore he had before the Great Retcon that happened in League of Legends when the Institute of War, the League of Legends itself, was retconned out of League of Legends. The Institute of War is the organization that used to run the League of Legends, and it was them who commissioned him to explore the uncharted reaches of the Guardian's Sea. And when he awakes and manages to return to Bilgewater, eventually he goes to the Institute of War and asks them to tell him who the hell he used to be, where is his family, who betrayed him, and they refuse to tell him. They refuse to tell him unless he will fight as a champion in the League of Legends. Excuse me. And so Nautilus' story in that version is one about where, like a lot of the old champions, the mechanism by which their story was meant to advance was the League of Legends itself. Like, the more he fights in the League of Legends, the more they will tell him about his previous life, the more he can kind of advance that emotional part of his story arc. But without the Institute of War, without the League of Legends, this version of the story kind of leaves him without any way to progress, like without any way to go forward, without any way to resolve the betrayal narrative, without any way to resolve the narrative of coming to terms with what he has become or who he is, without any way to really kind of explore who he used to be and explore the tragedy of what was lost when he was betrayed. All of that is kind of in limbo. It's really, the obvious way to progress has been sealed off, and so if this lore was to become a workable framework for telling stories about Nautilus, you'd have to change something. You would have to give him some kind of goal to pursue, some kind of way to figure out who he was, or some kind of reason to care who he used to be, which is not evident, particularly here. And so the solution that Riot seems to have gone for is to, okay, let's just throw all of that out, and instead go with the pure concept from which he was born, like this terrifying thing that lives in the sea and which can rise out at any moment and destroy you. Like, he represents the terror of the seas, like the danger of sailing into a storm, the danger of hitting on a hidden reef that you didn't know about. Like, just the Titan of the Depths is a very apt title for this version of him. So we have to ask the question, does this version of him work with his actual character design? And to a point it does. He looks like he's a thing that comes from the sea. He carries a giant anchor. He has big glowy eyes, which is supposed to be sort of scary. But there's a bit of an issue. Nautilus, as he looks right now in the game, is kind of cute. And I say that not in the sense of being a puppy dog cute, but in the sense of his proportions, in the sense of the way that he's put together. Because he's an old character model, because he was from a time when League of Legends had to run on even shittier toasters than it runs on now, his character model is relatively simple, both in terms of sheer polygon count. They have kept it very limited, but also in terms of just the design language of him is very simplistic. It's very kind of caricatured and distorted. So he has these short stubby legs, this giant upper body, and this enormous head. Like, if you take a look at his head, really, it is very big in relation to his body. He has these big eyes in relation to his body, and this adorable helmet that sits on top of his head, essentially. And all of that conspires to make him not really that scary. Like, he doesn't really look like the vengeful, raging titan of the depths. He looks, well, he looks like this. He looks like a black mage out of Final Fantasy. He looks like Vivi from Final Fantasy IX, one of my favorite characters of all time. He doesn't really look scary so much as he looks kind of caricatured. And that's a bit of an issue when he's supposed to be this vengeful titan of the depths, this arbiter of the justice of the bearded lady, this creature who will find you and punish you if you do wrong by one of the goddesses of the sea. Now, one of his character designs, specifically Abyssal Nautilus, embodies this idea much more closely. First of all, because it gives him a much smaller face. This version of Nautilus has a big face, at least a big black void in which the eyes are set, which essentially becomes a big face. This version of him keeps him much more contained and tightened up. There's a lot of imagery of prongs and forks going on his character design, and all of that makes him look substantially more scary. It makes him look a little bit more Warhammer 40k, essentially, with Warhammer in general, where you have these great big ornamented suits of armor that are particularly associated with the Warriors of Chaos, for example. It makes him look more Lovecraftian than his base model, but this is not his base model. This is a skin, and even that, honestly, especially when you see it in-game, frankly isn't that scary. Like, it looks a little bit more hostile, but it doesn't look like an unknowable titan of the depths. It looks like an evil dude in a diving suit. Now, the diving suit too serves a function in terms of the characterization of Nautilus. And as for an example, let's take a look at some other notable diving suit clad characters, the Big Daddies. And God, that word feels so dirty to say now. The Big Daddies of BioShock, specifically this guy, who's the protagonist of BioShock 2, Subject Alpha, I think he was called in the game, in the lore. So, part of the point of this character design in BioShock 2 is depersonalization. In the sense, it's taking away the identity of whoever is inside. The diving suit is this huge, bulky, pressurized thing with this massive mask on top of it that pretty much erases the shape of the character who is inside. It doesn't really conform to their anatomy or to their musculature very much, and insofar as anyone is concerned, whoever's inside there, and we've talked about this a little bit before when we talked about some character designs out of Dark Souls, could be 5 dogs stacked on top of each other. It could be a man, could be a woman, could be Groot from Guardians of the Galaxy. There's really no way to tell anything specific about the person inside the suit, and so the suit itself becomes the character design. But more than that, the facelessness, the lack of human features in this particular character design erases empathy. It erases the ability to look at the character and feel a connection. One of the great things that makes a connection between characters is eyes. This is why black mages in all of the Final Fantasy games, and indeed Vigar, have these glowing eyes in their darkened faces, why their faces are not completely concealed, because this right here gives them personality, it gives them soul, it gives them heart. Like, the cliche is that the eyes are the windows to the soul, but it's true. It's a huge part of how the human brain identifies personality, identifies that there is life in someone, is to look at the eyes. And so when you rob a character of that, like, again, we don't know if it's 5 dogs in there. It could also just be that it's a suit on display. There could be a mannequin in there. There could be nothing alive in there whatsoever. And that's what makes the Big Daddy in BioShock scary, is that, yeah, it's moving around, but is that a person in there, or is that some kind of wild animal? That's part of what makes them scary in the first BioShock game. And in the second BioShock game, it's part of the point of the characterization is that you play a character who has had all of their personality, all of their humanity taken away from them, and who has to rediscover it over the course of the game. So in that sense, you know, that's where that depersonalization comes into play. But with Nautilus, the thing about him is that he has a ton of personality. He has a ton of character going on with him. From his kind of stumpy, sort of distorted, caricatured model design to the way that he moves around in game. He kind of jumps around and has these little jaunty movements, and when you use his dancing mode, he swims through the air and he makes humming noises, and like a lot about how the character is designed comes packed with personality. Not expressive, loud personality like Rakan or Saya, but personality nonetheless. And if the character is supposed to be this: since time immemorial, Nautilus has roamed the dark waters of the coast of the Blue Flame Isles, dragging impious sailors to their doom. If that's what he's supposed to be, there's way too much humanity, there's way too much character, there's way too much charm in this character design to embody that. And so in order for this lore to really fit him, I think, there needs to be a rework. Like, there needs to be a full rethink of what Nautilus as a character is supposed to be about, because at the moment, yeah, no, I really don't see it. At the moment, the character design fits much better with his old lore, as it were, which relies on him being a person, which relies on him having a character, having a person in there for whom there can be a tragic loss. And again, if all you know about the character is this, nothing whatsoever, the reason why you can empathize with the Big Daddy in Bioshock 2 is because you play him. You are inside the diving helmet, as it were. But if all you get as an audience member is this, and no other information, no characterization, no personality, no nothing, then there's really no way to have tragedy. There's really no way to have a sense of loss, which is kind of the point of his old lore, is that he was this person who was just an ordinary guy who was betrayed, who lost everything, who lost his family, his identity, his home, who he used to be, where he used to come from, all of it lost to the tides. And he's supposedly trying to reclaim it, trying to reclaim who he is as a person. Which, you know, which works in a sense with this, because you can see there's life in his eyes, essentially. So, yeah, Nautilus is an old character. He's someone who has a lot of leftover flotsam kind of sticking to him, a lot of seaweed hanging by him that needs to be dealt with. His character design, in order to embody this new direction that Riot seems to go with him, needs to be substantially reworked. His personality needs to be, to a large extent, taken away. He needs to become unknowable in order to be terrifying. He needs to be personality-less in order to be scary. If you want him to be a force of nature, he can't have a sense of humor. Because, you know, earthquakes don't have a sense of humor. Neither do tsunamis. They are famously humorless. They are famously devoid of emotion or care for their victims. And if that's what you want Nautilus to be, sorry, but this character design kind of doesn't work. So I'm curious to see what Riot is going to do. I'm curious if they're going to lean hard into the idea of him as this avenging titan of the depths in service to this mysterious goddess, the bearded lady, or if they're going to go back a little bit to the classic idea of him as someone whose life was taken by the sea, whose identity was swept away by the tide, and who now has to reconstruct it like a man trying to lash together a ship from a shipwreck. I think the latter probably has more interesting stories to tell about Nautilus himself. Like, in terms of if you wanted to explore him as a character, then the approach that gives him character and personality is obviously the best one. But Nautilus as a force of nature, as a demon, as some kind of creature of the depths, makes him a great antagonist. Or not even an antagonist, but a great motivating force and a great bit player in other characters' story. Imagine Nami running into him as this force of nature. Nami, who is, you know, someone who can control the tides, control the waters, having to contend her power against his unstoppable tsunami nature. Like, that might be interesting. And having him interject, like when if misfortune is chasing down Gangplank in his ship, for instance, and then all of a sudden Nautilus just shows up and starts wrecking everybody's shit. That's a great dramatic moment. So that's the kind of thing you can do with him in that conception. But yeah, I don't know that I have a preference, really. I don't really know what I would be most interested in seeing Riot doing. I think both approaches have a lot of possibilities, a lot of interesting executions on the concept. So, yeah, I think that's about all I have to say. if you are inclined to join the Patreon that I talked about earlier, if you don't get in with the link down in the description, if you support me on Patreon, you will get in, because you're paying me money, so no problem. At any level, $1, whatever the hell you want to do, and you also get to vote on future video topics. There's like, at the moment I'm uploading this, I think the poll that you see over here has actually ended, and I'm going to be doing a video on Dark Souls bosses while also fighting those bosses. But in the future, if you want me to do a video about the history of the Yordles as a character design concept in League of Legends, or the character design of the Metal Gears, the robots in Metal Gear, those are things that you can vote for. I'm gonna have to update that Patreon supporter crawl, actually, because it doesn't include some of the names of the new people who have joined. Thank you all very much for joining up and adding, well, your names to the list and helping me out. I'm overwhelmed not only by the Patreon, but also by a lot of people suddenly showing up to like support me with with money, which to be honest has lifted a bit of a weight off my shoulders, because I've always been someone who I'm an artist. I'm a creative person, so I've been used to living very close to the edge of not being able to pay my rent, and that edge has gotten a little further away from me now, which has been a great relief. It's been tremendously helpful, so thank you all very, very much. I will update that Patreon crawl so that in the next video it shows everybody. Leave your comments down below. That's what I'm supposed to say at this point. You can leave your comments down below. There's a like button if you are so inclined. You can click the dislike button, but I mean, Nautilus, like, if you're gonna go sailing in like the next 10 years or so, I'm just saying, if Nautilus finds out that you click dislike on a video about him, I mean, I'm not superstitious, but it's the sea, and it's very deep, and there's monsters down there. I'm just saying, maybe some of them like Nautilus. Like, they could be Nautilus fanboys down there. It's the huge like group of deep sea otaku who are obsessed with deep sea characters like Nautilus. It's just, holy, that guy, he pushed the dislike button. Well, he's gonna have a little accident. I'm just saying. I don't know. It's possible. Thank you very much for listening to me ramble. Thank you very much for being here. And I will see you, I suppose. Good lord, I'm still not quite able to process any of this in the next video.